My name is Ragnar Luuksaar, and I'm the one responsible for the videos you see on this channel. Today I'll be talking about what it was like for me to grow up without my father. I was born in 2004 in February in Estonia, and I actually turned 21 years old very recently. My father had already left by the time I was born. So on my birth certificate, the father's space is empty, so I'm legally fatherless. That was my beginning. But of course, as a very small boy, I don't really think about this. I don't understand what has happened. I don't understand my situation. I don't understand that this is something that I should be maybe worried about or so. So when I'm like 4 years old, 5 years old, of course I know that usually kids have a mother and a father, but I didn't happen to have one. And I didn't think too much of it. In kindergarten, it never really, comes up. It's never really an issue. I didn't feel jealousy. I didn't feel bad in any sort of way because of it. And I was very outgoing. I was very extroverted. I was very confident back then. By the time I was maybe 7 years old and I go into school, I started realizing that, hey, this is maybe... I don't know what happened exactly. I don't know, but I start feeling like I am less than the other kids are. I feel like this is not acceptable to just talk about this. I don't want anybody to know that this is the reality. Of course my mom knows. Of course my family knows. But even when I'm there with the relatives and some sort of gatherings, nobody ever asks me about this. I never see anybody ask my mom about this. I don't remember when was the first time I asked my mom about this. For where's my dad? It must have been when I was very young. And I don't understand the kids who just never ask their mom about where's my dad. I don't understand. How can you never ask your mom where is your dad? How can you never ask them? You really you don't care. You're not curious. You don't want to know what's up. But of course I'm a very curious person, so I have no idea when was the first time when I asked my mom about that question, and I have no idea what she responded, but I imagine it would have been something like, oh, it didn't work out, or something like that. It wasn't something like a really significant answer. And I suppose, as I was very young, whatever that answer was probably sufficient for me. So I didn't think much of it. But when I was, like I said, when I was 7 years old, I started worrying about this. My confidence started going away. There was this one situation in a class where we had to do draw our family trees, and the way I did it was I wrote my name, made a bubble around it, then it's one line up, then it's my mother's name, and then it's my mother's parents, and then their parents, my great parents, grandparents, and great grandparents. That's how I did it, and I got not a terrible grade for that work, but I got a slightly less. I didn't get the best grade possible for that work, and in first grade, pretty much everybody gets good grades if they just do what they're asked to do. I didn't tell my mom about this. I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't talk to the teacher about why did I get a bad grade. I'm not an idiot. I know how to do it, but I didn't do the father's side because I don't know what his name is. I don't know where he is. I don't know pretty much anything about him. So I kept it down. That was the first specific incident that I guess I can remember when I started hiding. I avoided that. There was another incident that I specifically remember. This was an English class, maybe in the 3rd grade. I was maybe 10 years old. And the exercise in the class was this, that everybody had to tell what their father's name was, what his job was, what the mother's name was, and what her job was. That's what everybody had to do, and then randomly, the students started asking each other, those 4 questions. And I get really worried. I get really, really, really worried. Because there's a problem. I don't know what my father's name is. I don't know what his job is. It has nothing to do with I don't know how to say that in English. That has nothing to do with that. But so the kids start randomly asking each other, and I have no idea how I'm gonna solve this situation, because really, what am I gonna say? I'm gonna say that I don't know and just have the whole class laugh at me, or I'm gonna just lie and then I have to keep that lie up. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna get out of the situation? I'm getting really worried. I'm almost having almost like a panic attack. My heart is beating out of my chest. And I'm the last one who hasn't. This is just through fluke luck, just luck. Just randomly, that I'm the last one who hasn't said those questions, and some girl or whoever it was is about to ask me those questions, and then the English teacher interrupts her, and she says, "I'm gonna ask Ragnar myself." And she asked me what my mother's name was, what my mother's work was, and then she said, "Let's go on with the lesson now, class." She saw that I was having a mental breakdown. She saw that, and she stepped in and specifically didn't ask me those 2 questions, because I guess she sort of just sensed that I couldn't answer those questions, not because I didn't have the English, but just because I didn't have the answers. In hindsight, of course, I could have just said that, "Oh, I need to go to the bathroom," and then I would have gone to the bathroom for 20 minutes. I could have got myself out of it that way, but at the time I didn't think of that. So that was the way I was back then. That was the way I was as a child. Every time people would start talking about their parents, or it would the conversation would go into that direction, where it would be almost where I would maybe have to say something, or somebody might ask me about my father. I would want to get out of that. I would try to change the subject of the conversation. I would try to just leave. Just say, "Oh, I have to go home now. I have to go to the bathroom now." Just something like that. Something just, whatever. Or sometimes when I couldn't just weasel myself out of it, I would just lie. I would just say then "Oh, he is in in a business trip. Oh yeah, he lives with us. I grew up with my mom and my grandmother. Oh yeah, he lives with us. Oh, but he's in Sweden right now. And he's a doctor, and he's just on a business trip right now." That's something that I said sometimes. I just lied. Because I didn't want to tell the truth. And this went on for many, many years. There was this time, on the summer, there was a field trip that I did with my class in high school. Between this was the summer between the 10th and the 11th grade, so I was 17 years old. And at some point in the evening, this is maybe 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. on that, field trip day, and I'm in this cabin with there's some girls, there's some guys. There's no funny business. We're just talking and we're listening to music, and suddenly this one girl is I guess she was thinking that she wanted to get to know us better. She wanted people to connect, and she proposed that why don't we just all say how many brothers and sisters we have. And I'm realizing that, okay, I'm in trouble. I have to get out of this situation. Because the truth is, I don't know how many brothers and sisters I have. I know at that point, I already knew that I had some half brothers and sisters on my father's side. I knew I was an only child. I didn't have any siblings growing up. So I knew I had some half siblings somewhere out there in the world. But really, how many I have? The truth is, I don't know. at the time, that would have been the truth. Or I could have lied. And I didn't want to do neither of those things. Because when I say that, oh, I don't know how many brothers and sisters I have, everybody's going to want to know, hey, so how do you not know that? What is going on here, you know? And then I would have had to start talking about my father, and of course that's something that I did not want to do. So I got up and I said, oh, I'm feeling sleepy, I'm going to go and sleep now. And I went to my own cabin. I wasn't sleepy at all, I just needed to get out of that situation. And that's just yet another, like, one story that happened, one thing that I did to get out of that situation. And this is like, and I was 17 years old when that happened. So you see, this is like when I'm like 7 to like 17 at least. This was at least 10 years that I was doing this thing, that I was running away from this stuff. Why was I running away? Because I didn't think that people would accept me. I didn't think that people would just understand me. I didn't feel confident because also, you see, my father knew that I existed. My father knew my mother's phone number. He didn't know where we lived, but he could have called us. He wasn't in jail. He wasn't in a different country. He wasn't rich, but he was doing financially pretty good. And he just didn't care. He just didn't call. He didn't call when I was 4 years old. He didn't call when I was 8 years old or 12 years old or 16 years old. He never called. When he easily could have. He wasn't in jail. He wasn't, homeless. He just didn't care. He knew that I was out there, and he just didn't care. And how was that supposed to make me feel? How was that supposed to affect my confidence, my self-esteem? And it took away my confidence. It took away my self-esteem. Like large chunks of that, I did have some self-esteem, but not a lot. I did have some confidence, but a fraction of what I had when I was like 4 years old. I was definitely, like when I was 4 years old, I was definitely an extrovert. But by the time I'm like 10 or 11 years old, just hiding this stuff, just not wanting that attention on me, I became an introvert just because my father left. So I didn't want to talk about it because I thought that I would be bullied if it came out. And I was bullied. I was bullied in school. Because also, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Estonia at the time, in my class, in basic school and also in high school, as far as I know, I was the only kid who didn't have a father. So it was a very strange thing. It wasn't like there's a bunch of us out there. It was very strange. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be just normal. I just wanted to have friends and just live a normal life. That's what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to talk about this. I didn't want to talk about my father not being there. I didn't want people to know that I'm living with my mom and my grandmother. I didn't want people to know this. But of course, eventually it sort of came out, and people would just there was this one guy who would ask, he would make jokes, and he would ask me oh, where's your father, in front of the whole class, or some things like that. Or he would ask me oh, is your father black, or is he from the Middle East, or is he a terrorist? He would ask me stuff like that in front of a lot of people. And that was traumatizing, and nobody ever stepped up for me. Nobody ever protected me. And that just showed me that, I'm not safe. I'm not cool to just talk about this stuff. I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the strength at the time to just talk about these things. So I didn't. I hid and I lied. And that's what I did for many years. That's what I did for more than 10 years. Throughout my whole childhood. Throughout high school. I never just owned it. What I wish somebody would have told me at that time was just the truth. The truth is that, so you're growing up without your father. Yeah, you're at a disadvantage. That's a big deal. That does affect it completely changes your life. If I would have had a father, my life would have been completely different. My life is good now, but it would be completely different And that's just a fact. Anybody who tells you otherwise, that is, oh, it's not a big deal, oh, just a mom is enough, they're not very smart. That's not the case. I'm speaking from experience, and it's a big deal. So, I wish somebody would have told me that it is a big deal, and you're at a disadvantage compared to other kids, and you're just gonna have to work harder. You're gonna have to be more responsible. You're gonna have to grow up quicker. And you're gonna have to deal with this. But there's good sides to it. You know, like, if you've grown up without your father, there's a bunch of other people as well who have gone through the same experience. When you meet them, and you both have grown up without a father, it's like an instant connect. You know, you instantly know this other person's like what relatively, you know, what they've gone through. This is like an instant connection, so that you can just connect to people who have also grown up fatherless. You can just like connect to them on a really deep level really quickly. That's like a superpower that you can't have if you had two parents. And also, yeah, I never had a stepdad. I never had any sort of father figure. I just never had a dad. My mother was also an only child, so I never had like an uncle. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, of course, he was there, but he died when I was 14 years old. And my grandfather had like a brother, so I had him, kind of, but I never really had a father figure. I definitely never had a dad when I was growing up. Never had it. Never had him. So eventually, I did end up meeting my father. In a way, the first time I ever saw him was when I was like 6 years old, actually. But that was just like an accident. I was like walking in the, you know, my hometown with my mom, and we just bumped into each other on the street. And I was 6 years old, so I didn't remember much of it at all. And I didn't know who he was at the time, so I didn't know that, okay, remember this face. You know, you're gonna be thinking a lot about this guy in the future, you know. And also another thing, like, I had to blame somebody. I had to explain this situation to myself somehow, like whose fault is this? I didn't blame myself. I didn't blame my dad for some reason, and I blame my mom. I blame my mom for the fact that my father left, and that definitely, you know, wasn't good. That wasn't the right thing to do. Now, at 21 years old, looking back on the whole thing, I would say it's nobody's fault. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. You know, I've got my traumas, I've got my issues now. I've dealt with a lot of them. That's why I'm able to speak about this right now. That's why I'm like doing the opposite of hiding. The opposite of avoiding. So that's really what just, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters is whose responsibility it is to make things right now. That's what matters now. So I did eventually meet my father. Remember that story I told you? The summer between 10th and 11th grade when I was 17 years old. And, you know, and I was, you know, in that cabin. On that same summer, I finally called my father, and my mom had given me the phone number like a year prior, and I was just sitting on the phone number. I didn't have the courage to just make that phone call at the time. Maybe I was still hoping that he would finally call him, because I knew if I was gonna call him, then this is it. You know, it's like, you never called. The way the radio silence ended was when I called you. And that's just gonna be the basis of whatever sort of interactions we will have in the future. So maybe I didn't want that to happen. I was still gonna be holding on to some hope that he was gonna call and he was gonna care about me, and we could start like that. So, but when I was 17, and on that summer, I just decided I'm just gonna call him, and I'm gonna find out what type of a guy he is. And so I called him. I met up with him. I went to visit him at his house. I talked with him for maybe 4 hours at least, hear about his own stories, I tell my stories. He never apologized, and also I didn't go into the interaction just like, oh, where were you? Like, why didn't you help us? What's wrong with you? I wasn't going into it like trying to beat out an apology out of him. I just went into it just out of curiosity, just out of like, I don't know you, dude. I just want to get to know you. I just want to know who you are. I'm giving you just this like, I'm giving you a chance to just show me who you are. And he just started like, he criticized me a lot, when I met him. He just criticized me a lot about like, why am I so skinny? Why is my hair like this? And just he was criticizing me a lot, and he didn't apologize. I met him 4 times in that year in 2021. 4 different occasions, I always went to visit him at his home. And after the 4th time, I was just like, why am I even here? Like, it's obviously that he's not a good guy. For what he told me, I asked him how many half brothers and sisters do I have? And he told me that he has, besides me, he has 2 boys and 2 girls that he's aware of. His words exactly. That's the sort of a guy that he was, that he's aware of. I mean, that's actually a pretty funny way to say it, but I mean, but it is what it is. I saw what kind of a guy he was, and he wasn't a good guy. Obviously, he wasn't a good guy because as far as I know, he never got married to anyone. He wasn't married to my mom. He wasn't married to anyone. And I think he abandoned all of his kids, all 5 of his kids. So it wasn't like some issue that he had specifically with me. That's just the type of guy that he was. So after the 4th time of meeting him, I sort of just realized that, I already knew that I wasn't going to have a father now because, okay, I'm 17 years old. I'm kind of almost an adult now. I don't really need a father anymore, but what I could use is a friend. I could use a friend. And I realized that he was not going to be my friend because he was just criticizing me all the time. He wasn't a good guy. He was going to be one of those like dads. If he would have been in my life, he would have been one of those fathers who would have just been like never proud of like anything. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you do, it wouldn't have been enough for him. He would never been proud. So I just decided to not call him anymore. And now, 2022, 2023, 24, now it's 25. More than 3 years have gone by now, and he hasn't called me not one single time. I haven't spoken to him, I haven't seen him for like more than 3 years. And he has my own phone number now. He can call me directly or send me a text message, and he's just not doing it. Which really just confirms that, it's not like he tried to contact me when I was like a little boy, and then my mom just didn't want to see him, or no. He never called my mom. He just never did that. So, how did I deal with that? How am I able to talk about it now? Well, I had 2 options. I was either gonna forgive him, or I was just gonna want revenge. I was gonna want some sort of like punishment for what he had done. And I decided to forgive him. I finally forgave him last year actually. And I didn't call him or anything. I did it just with myself. That's what I did. And now I can talk about this. I wish him the best. And you know how I could forgive him? You know why I wish him the best in life now? Because the first time I met him, he told me a story. So he went to college, I think this was in Moscow. This was like in the Soviet Union times. So he went to college in like Moscow or like St. Petersburg, or like Leningrad as it was known back then. And when he came back home to Turkmenistan, he was actually from Turkmenistan. then his father like saw that he had grown long hair when he was in college in Russia. And so my grandfather and his father, he said like, I'm not letting you in the house unless you cut your hair. I'm not letting you in the house with that hair. So my father had to go to like the nearest barber shop and just have his hair cut short in order to go back, into his home, because he had no other place to go to at the time. So he just cut his hair and he was allowed back home. I mean, and that's just one story that he told me. So I'm sure he had a traumatizing childhood, and I'm sure he had a terrible childhood. When I asked him about like, what was your father like? What was my grandfather like? He told that, oh, he was so strict and he was a terrible guy. So that just shows me that he's not like he's not just like this like evil person who's just fundamentally evil. That's not. I don't think those people exist. I think people only do bad things if bad things have been done to them. Hurt people hurt people, as the saying goes. And my grandfather, what he told me, had went to the Second World War when he was like 16 or 17 years old. I think my grandfather was born in like the 1920s somewhere. And he had been injured in a war. Some Nazi threw like a grenade, and my grandfather got like a grenade shot into his thigh. And he almost died. So that shows and that's why my grandfather was that way. Because how do you go into the war when you're like 16 or 17 years old, almost get killed, and not have PTSD? How do you not have PTSD? So that's why my grandfather was not so functioning. So that, you see, and that's why I can forgive him. That's why I can forgive him. And I suppose that's what the moral of the story is. It's just that you just have to forgive. Or what's the alternative? You want revenge? You just want somebody to do bad in life? You just have to forgive if you want to move on. And also sort out your traumas and stuff, and just stop running away. Stop running away from reality. But I don't want to give like too much advice here. This is my story, this is my experience. I'm sure a lot of other people have different experiences with this sort of a situation, this sort of a childhood. This is my story.